And the Crown also points to a woman, Karina Walker, who positively identified Mr. Winters among 7 men that police showed her as being the man she saw behind the wheel of a blue Jeep Cherokee on the Train Road area that same day. And the Crown also stresses quite a bit on the minor road crash a week before as providing some kind of link and motive between the victim and the accused.
What about the defence rebuttal?
Well, the defence had 1 day of evidence where it called 9 witnesses, some via video link, others took the stand. And basically they said, the defence lawyer said, Jonathan Tem, that there was just too much variation about the description of the driver, where he refers to at least two of his witnesses saying that a large Māori man was seen driving, that there was more than one person in the car, and that essentially the jurors couldn't be sure enough to find Mr. Winters guilty of the murder. He also says, Mr. Tem also says that his client doesn't know what happened as his client was not there. And he also dismisses the Crown's propensity evidence, which relates to Mr. Winters being is the type to overreact to minor things, such as the minor crash the week before, saying that it wasn't a catalyst, that he had no motive, he did not know Mr. Tairoa, had never spoken to him, so therefore he just hadn't done it.
So what's expected to happen today?
Well, Justice Toogood will give his summing up. I understand it's going to take about half an hour at the High Court in Rotorua, and it's been a packed public gallery for most of the time, so there could be some kind of reaction, I guess, as we wait for the jury to deliberate on its verdicts, which could take some time given the length of the trial.
Carla Penman, thank you very much. She's been at the High Court in Rotorua. 18 minutes to 8. A year after the Prime Minister offered the opportunity for some temporary workers in the South Island to apply for New Zealand residency, there's no sign of the promised changes. Workers who are waiting for that chance, like members of the Fijian community in Christchurch, are asking why. Belinda McCammon talked to some of those affected.
Artie Devi has lived in Christchurch for 8 years and works as a carer. She has studied early childcare education, but without residency cannot find a job in the sector. She says John Key's announcement gave her false hope.
It gave hope to me and to our entire community who's on a work visa, saying, all right, if law changes, it's a way to get residency and we can move forward, like buying house, going for our further education.
Artie Devi says she knows about 20 families in Christchurch in a similar situation and everybody is waiting.
I've been making phone calls to immigration and also some of my people from the community, from Fiji community. They also have been calling, but the only feedback we get is nothing is happening at the moment. They are also waiting for feedback, but nothing.
Artie Devi's daughter, Alvina Lal, is waiting for a student visa to be approved so she can study. She says without residency, she and her friends will have to pay thousands in international student fees.
There's a lot of frustration going on. We want to actually, if we want to study something else, we can't, because we have to study something that's a skill job. From a skill job, it's pretty much us going back to scratch from what our parents came and did. So just like helping our family now, so end of the day, we're back to scratch.
Abdul Khan, also from Fiji, has been a bus driver in Christchurch for the past 9 years. He says the working visa he and many of his friends are on is subject to renewal every 3 years.
We don't know where we stand. We're paying taxes like other people and they get privileges. We don't. We pay full fees and we work hard. Like some of us have bought a property here. Our children are here. They're going to school and we have nothing left back in our country because we've been living here for so long.
Sudonri Nagrea has also been a bus driver in Christchurch since 2011. He says there should be exemptions for people who have been working in New Zealand for so long.
A very unstable kind of situation, the kind of life we live. It's neither here or there. We don't know whether we will be living here for good or we will be refused and we will be sent home. We cannot invest here, we cannot, we can't plan our future well.
He says workers from the Fijian community have done their bit for Christchurch, forming community groups and helping people in stress.
We ourselves suffered so much during the earthquakes. We had no toilets. We had to leave our homes and go away to some other place. Those are all financial stress, and I know we don't get paid much anyway. And then apart from that, life itself, living on a work visa is for so long, does not permit us to make permanent decisions.
A spokesperson for the Minister of Immigration says he was not available for an interview, but that the policy initiative is definitely still on the work programme and the details are still being worked through. In Christchurch for Morning Report, Belinda McCammon.
It's 7:45. Coming up at 8 o'clock, we have a special debate between 8 and 9 hosted by Guy and Espiner. The four main Auckland mayoral candidates will be squaring off against each other. You can listen on the radio. You can also watch. It's going to be streamed online at rnz.co.nz and on Freeview Channel 50. Also a full analysis wrap-up with Todd Nile towards the end of that hour. So do stick with us for that. Staying in Auckland on the Southern Motorway, still delays city-bound between Papakura and Takanini. That's because of an earlier crash just before the Takanini off-ramp. And front pages this morning, the New Zealand Herald in Auckland leading with mayoral candidate Phil Goff's plan to bring forward plans to build a light rail link costing up to $1.3 billion. The paper also has a picture of a very brave 6-year-old, Sarah Patel. She was caught on video standing up to an axe-wielding robber in her father's North Shore shop. In the Waikato Times, an outgoing business leader tells Hamilton it has an image problem caused by the people themselves. They're too negative about the city and need to grow up. Onto the Dominion Post, Upper Hutt woman Leslie Soul talks about the day she tried to talk down gunman Peris Smiler before he was shot dead by police a year ago. The IPCA's released a report and says Miss Soul's actions were brave and well-intentioned. In the press this morning, reports that the property market in Christchurch is beginning to cool off as demand for new subdivisions outstrip traditional suburbs. And the Otago Daily Times leading with a warning from Mount Aspiring College to parents and students as a student lies in an induced coma in Dunedin Hospital with meningococcal disease. Cases in Otago and Southland are on the rise, and there's also been one death just last month. 13 minutes to 8. In the United States, the race for the White House and the Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's gone after rival Donald Trump for not making his tax returns public. Speaking to reporters on board her plane, Mrs. Clinton says it's the right of the American public to have this information.
He said that the American people don't care about his tax returns. And in fact, he's also said that it's none of our business. I just think he's dead wrong. I mean, the reason that presidential candidates going back decades have released their tax returns is because the American people want to know. If they're going to entrust a president with the management of our country's finances, they want to know, how did this person handle his or her own finances, which is, one of the reasons why we've released 40 years of tax returns. The Washington Post has a long list of many of the behaviors, the experiences, the activities that Trump is engaged in that raise serious questions. The New York Times discovered about $650 million owed to foreign banks and foreign entities. We know about his relationships with the Kremlin, his own and those of people with whom he has worked. And truly, the list goes on and on. The scams, the frauds, the questionable relationships, the business activities that have stiffed workers, refused to pay small businesses. So clearly, his tax returns tell a story that the American people deserve and need to know. And his continuing claim that he can't release his tax returns because he's under audit has been disproved repeatedly.
There are only 9 weeks to go before Americans vote for the next president, and the latest polls from CNN show the two candidates are neck and neck. CNN's Dana Bash says there's a shift in strategy now that Mrs. Clinton's post-convention bump has gone.
It's very clear that one of the main reasons she came back today is to set the agenda, and she said it point blank, to say she's going to keep talking about the fact that Donald Trump hasn't released his taxes. By the candidate herself doing that in this kind of forum, it is going to keep the pressure on Donald Trump. But more importantly, I think, going back to our poll today that shows that Donald Trump, not Hillary Clinton, is seen as by far the most trustworthy and honest, she's trying to turn that on its head to say, wait a minute, he's not getting the same kind of scrutiny that I am. We don't know anything about his personal finances. We should be asking that question, and she's going to continue to do so to try to flip those numbers around.
CNN's Dana Bash reporting. 10 minutes to 8 on Morning Report. And a few big names have already been thrown around as possible replacements for the All Black Sevens coach, Sir Gordon Tietjens. The master coach stepped down yesterday after 22 years in charge of the team, conceding its failed Olympics campaign added to his decision. Max Toll's report starts with the coach himself.
It's not about one person in our side. It's not about relying on those players with the X factor. You know, I have a favourite saying in my team, whoever plays will do the job, and it's always about all of us and we, and that to me is everything.
That was Sir Gordon in 2012, summing up his philosophy as coach. In the same interview, he talked up the 2016 Rio Olympics and his excitement at playing for a medal. Fast forward 4 years and the team's disappointing campaign has ended Sir Gordon's tenure on a real low. Nevertheless, sport commentator Keith Quinn says that won't define his legacy.
He brought an exactness of preparation and planning and team spirit to the teams, the family environment that no one else had ever done in New Zealand rugby.
He says New Zealand rugby must throw more of its support to Sevens rugby to keep the men's and women's teams at the top of the pile. NZ Rugby's chief executive Steve Tew says it will consider centralising the men's and women's Sevens programmes and keeping all of its players at one training base.
It's quite hard to build a succession plan when you have the world's best coach in place for a very long time, and we don't make any apology for that. The fact the series is now such a well-developed program, like a lot of our international coaches, they find that you've got to attract a person that's prepared to be away from home a lot. You know, it's a very attractive opportunity for somebody, whether they remain a specialist Sevens coach or want to come and do Sevens and then into or out of 15s, I don't know. I think we'll keep those options open.
A few big names have already been thrown in the hat. Keith Quinn reckons the outgoing gold medal winning Fiji coach Ben Ryan would be a good shout.
Maybe, I whisper this, maybe New Zealand might have to go beyond a New Zealander. Ben Ryan would be fantastic to come to New Zealand. I've seen that little guy up close too, and see the magic that he's done, not just with Fiji in our recent memory banks, but when he coached England, he was wonderful with them as well. He seems to have a very human touch.
Carl Tinana, who won Commonwealth Games gold with the team in 2002, backs Sevens legend Eric Rush, who currently owns a New World supermarket.
He's a guy who's got natural respect amongst the playing group. He's got that head coach Mana. He's got that coaching now. He won 3 titles on the trot for Auckland at the Nationals and Sevens, and I think he's a guy who will get instant success.
All Blacks and Sevens legend Christian Cullen isn't so sure.
Yeah, well, he's got to get out of a supermarket, mate. I think he's pretty busy doing his New World thing. There's a few guys in the sort of national team. You know, Scotty Waldron's been around there doing a pretty good job lately. Geez, there could be even guys, you know, DJ Forbes or someone like that that's been in the scene playing for a while that might think that he might want it.
Keith Quinn says a lack of speed was a big reason behind New Zealand's failure in Rio, and a new coach and system should herald a new batch of young stars.
In the end, I think other countries around the world caught up to his coaching manner and his style, and I think on the field of play his teams ran out of outright speed. They weren't as fast as the nations playing in the events against New Zealand were able to seek out speedier players, and at the Olympic Games we were exposed, and I think New Zealand's Sevens rugby was a bit embarrassed.
Yet he says he hopes all of Sir Gordon's successes, including his 43 Sevens players who went on to become full All Blacks, won't be forgotten. For Morning Report, Max Toll.
6 to 8. An icy blast is barrelling its way up the country today, hitting in the deep south this morning to arrive in Canterbury mid to late afternoon and then making its way further north. Let's talk to Richard Green. He's a weather commentator. Morning.
Good morning, Susie.
Just how bad is it going to be?
Well, it's certainly going to be noticeable, especially with the temperatures that we've had lately. And, we're supposed to be in spring, but this is a bit of a revisit to winter. And we didn't see a lot of activity in winter, but we're talking very cold winds. That'll be the main factor, I think. The southerly moving across the country today and across the North Island more so tonight and then tomorrow. But also coming with this, Susie, is the wintry conditions. Showers to low levels in eastern areas particularly, maybe as low as a couple of 100 metres. So you'd normally expect that in July, but here we are well into September, well, the first week anyway, and we're looking at these sorts of conditions. So could be a bit of an issue for farmers and spring lambs, etc., and about the alpine passes too. But also want to throw in there, Susie, swells for the likes of Wellington. This could be a concern if the winds are as severe and the swells as significant of between 2 and 4 metres coming onto the foreshore that have been forecast. So that'll be one to watch tonight, but particularly for Wellingtonians during tomorrow.
And is this something, are you expecting it to be as bad as that storm a few years ago that really battered the south coast?
Yeah, there's potential for that. It doesn't mean it's not a guarantee. There's a chance of it. And as it roars up the eastern part of the South Island, then moves across Cook Strait, it may gain some speed there. But also it's because the swells are coming directly from the south, and we haven't seen that much this year too. So it looks like it could really pack a punch, and something just to be aware of today and tomorrow, not only for Wellington but around the country.
Richard Green, weather commentator, thank you very much for your time on Morning Report. Well, our Auckland mayoralty debate is coming up live at 8 o'clock on rnz.co.nz, Freeview Channel 50. Also, of course, it is going to be right here on the Radio 101 FM. That's coming up with Guy and Espiner. First, though, Nicola Wright and the news headlines.
One of the world's biggest fund managers is giving in to pressure from KiwiSaver providers to come up with an ethical investment option. Vanguard International says it is willing to create a new fund just for New Zealand that complies with the law and meets investors' fears about money ending up in companies that make cluster bombs, landmines and nuclear weapons. Several default KiwiSaver providers invested in such firms through a passive fund run by Vanguard, but most have now dumped it. The government insists it's not scrambling to fix the housing shortage and has a grand plan to deal with it. Yesterday, Parliament went into urgency to pass legislation allowing special housing areas to be created for another 3 years. The government also announced it was boosting funding for new social housing places in Auckland by $24 million. Opposition parties say the moves are desperate measures from a disorganised government. Meanwhile, a mortgage advisor says people wanting to buy a small apartment in Auckland could find it very difficult to get a loan. As average house prices for the city hit $1 million, the Housing Minister, Nick Smith, has said young people have to prioritise between small apartments and long commutes. But the chief executive of the mortgage supply company, Jenny Campbell, says buyers need to ensure the apartment they buy is of good value. She says most banks won't lend on anything smaller than 40 square metres because they don't see it as a quality living environment. In Australia, the police have dismissed as propaganda a call in an Islamic State magazine for attacks to be carried out on specific locations in Melbourne and Sydney. The police say much of the article had been reprinted, and the only new content is a poem making reference to a number of Australian locations. One of the country's biggest unions says a high number of employees without a written contract comes as no surprise because people are vulnerable when they're looking for work. The latest statistics show 1 in 10 employees does not have a written contract. Temporary and casual workers are more likely than others to be in that situation. The ETU union says a lot of people run into trouble when they think they've agreed to certain conditions, but further down the track, the employer changes their mind. The government says a written contract is a legal requirement and it expects all employers to comply with the law. The World Health Organization has revised its guidance to people who have visited parts of the world affected by the Zika virus. The new advice is that men and women returning from these areas should practice safer sex or abstinence for 6 months. The virus is spread by mosquitoes, but there's mounting evidence sexual transmission is more common than first believed. Iraqi officials say they have now managed to put out most of the fires in more than a dozen oil wells set ablaze by Islamic State jihadists. The fires were set as government forces drove IS out of an area south of the city of Mosul. That's the news. Now the forecast from Met Service to midnight. Severe weather warnings and watches for southern and central New Zealand today for a change to southerly gales, bringing snow to low levels. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mostly fine, but brief showers this evening. The rest of the North Island, showers in the southwest this morning, spreading elsewhere this afternoon. The showers turn to rain south of Taranaki tonight, and there's snow to 400 metres. Nelson gets a few showers, heavier in the west, clearing this evening. Everywhere else in the South Island areas, squally showers with isolated thunderstorms and cold southwest gales spreading north today. Snow gradually lowers to 200 metres in the south and east. And the Chatham Islands is fine, apart from a few showers this afternoon. Main centre temperatures: Auckland 16 degrees, Hamilton 15, Wellington 14, Christchurch 16 and Dunedin 12. This is RNZ National. It's 8 o'clock.
Kia ora and a very good morning and welcome to this Morning Report special, the Auckland Mayoralty debate. Who will run the super city? Here with us this morning are Phil Goff, Vic Crone, John Polino and Mark Thomas. We're going to be discussing all the big issues facing Auckland this morning: housing, transport, population, immigration, Māori issues, questions of leadership, questions of character. And it won't only be me asking the questions this morning. We're here live at Auckland University of Technology. This is a joint venture between RNZ and AUT. And if the AUT students crewing the studio are doing a good job, and I think that they are, you'll be able to hear us on the radio as per normal. But you'll also be able to watch this live streamed on our website, rnz.co.nz, or you can watch us on Freeview Channel 50. So we're going to be taking questions from the audience here today, and we're going to wrap all this up over the next hour with a panel of expert analysis led by our Auckland correspondent Todd Nile. Now, joining Todd Nile this morning, Stella Muller, she's a South Auckland entrepreneur, and also Simon Wilson, who is of course editor-at-large of Metro magazine. So let's crack into this. We're going to get into the chunky issue of housing pretty shortly, but let's start with a few brief overview questions to our candidates first. Who's the left-wing candidate here?
I'm left of centre. The guy on the left. I got more policies about people than most of them.
Okay, all right. Phil Goff, if I can personalise this, let's say I'm Stephen, I'm a 25-year-old Māori man renting a house in Mangere. Why should I vote? Not only for you, why should I bother voting at all?
Let's take why you should bother voting at all first. It's because this is about the future of our city. This is about the future of more than a third of New Zealand's population, and it's a vital time for Auckland as our population grows and our infrastructure doesn't keep up. If you're 25 and you're living in Mangere, chances are you might be renting your home. Your rents have gone up 5 times, 6 times more than the overall rate of inflation. If you have that Kiwi dream of buying your own home, you can't do it at the moment. If you want to travel into work, each day the roads get more crowded. Now, local government can't do everything about that, but local government, the mayor, can be a strong advocate for our city.
Right.
OK, second part of the question, why vote for me?
I didn't actually ask you that. But
I was going to tell you anyway.
Yeah, you'll get plenty of opportunities to get into that.
Enough.
Vic Crone, if I may. The turnout has been terrible. Last time we had 35% turnout generally. The turnout for over 70s was something like 90%, but the young ones aren't voting at all. Why is that? Why such apathy?
Well, a big part of it is because Auckland Council doesn't engage youth right across Auckland in terms of the way that Auckland Council communicates with younger people. It's pretty old world and pretty uninspiring. And I think many of Auckland don't actually understand the role that Auckland Council play in our city's success. And if more people got that, then I think more people would turn out.
So what are you talking about, having more apps and getting on Twitter more and communicating with people like that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that's a really big part of it. That's how people today are communicating.
Shouldn't we be voting online this time then?
Well, that's something that is being looked at into the future. But I think the killer for me is that if you look at cities, they are emerging as the growth engines of the world. Where is our growth coming from globally? It's cities. And so young people should have an absolute say in what the future growth of their city looks like. Because in terms of employment, job creation, we talked about entrepreneurs, we've got one on the panel here, that is the future of Auckland. And so part of my job has been trying to engage not just the young people, but even that 30 to 50-year-old generation.
Okay, let's stick with engagement.
Who aren't
John Polino, there'll be a lot of people watching and listening to this outside of Auckland. Why should they care who leads Auckland?
Well, Auckland and the growth of Auckland has changed quite a few cities around New Zealand. House prices are going up everywhere, and that's a reflection of what's happening in Auckland. People are moving out of Auckland, moving to other areas because they're getting desperate. They can't afford to live here anymore, and they're moving to those areas. So people all throughout New Zealand should be concerned about what's happening in Auckland.
Mark Thomas, what would you do on your first day as mayor should you win?
So the first thing is to start preparing a budget, but you can only do that if you've got relationships. I know, having been on council for 6 years, of course, many of the people who I think will be re-elected, the mayor has to propose their budget 3 weeks after they assume office on the 1st of November, and without having the detailed experience of council, the other candidates really won't have the ability to do that as effectively as I think I can.
All right, fair enough. Let's get cracking into the issue of housing. This must be the biggest issue facing Auckland, possibly the biggest issue facing the country. The government, the Prime Minister, the ministers say there is no housing crisis. Anyone who thinks there is not a crisis in housing in Auckland, start speaking now.
There is a crisis in housing. And I think the person who is best to deal with that is someone who understands the unitary plan and who knows that it's not a silver bullet, actually. We could have built more affordable housing in the areas like Henderson and Manukau and Takapuna. We could have brought that under the old rules. What we've got to do is rewrite the budget, rewrite the Auckland plan, put more funding into the bulk infrastructure, the water and the roads, and actually get council working a lot quicker.
All right. Does anyone here want house prices to fall in Auckland?
I'd like them to stabilise.
Yeah. No, but more affordable housing.
Let's start.
You've
had a good run, Mark. Let's start with Phil Goff.
Yeah. The fact is, I don't think either the council or even the government will determine whether house prices fall or not. I think that if the bubble gets sufficiently big and then there's an external shock or interest rates go up quite sharply, then house prices will fall, as they fell in Dublin by 43%.
Do you think, are you worried about that? Do you think that is going to happen?
I hope not. I hope not, for the sake of the tens of thousands, particularly of those people that have bought their homes in the last couple of years, because if house prices suddenly fall, they're left with negative equity. They're left with a much bigger debt than they have in the value of their home, and that then has an impact on the wider economy, and that could well push us into recession. That's why we've got to stop the housing bubble getting bigger. It's the most urgent problem we face today.
It's $1 million at the moment, isn't it, for an average?
That's right.
Absolutely.
Look, the only way that we're going to be able to stabilise the housing market is to build more homes. We're currently 30,000 homes short, and every year we add another 5,000 homes short. And what is that causing? This is causing multiple problems across Auckland. So you've got the issue of people sleeping rough. You've got the issue of people on social welfare actually not being able to afford to live here. And then you've actually got a new issue that's emerging that we haven't seen before, that those households earning around $50,000 to $80,000 can no longer ever afford to buy a home in Auckland. So we've locked a whole generation of Aucklanders out of the market
we're pretty well
because
aware,
we don't have enough
We're pretty
homes.
well aware. We know these problems exist. So what is it that you think you would be able to bring as a solution other than the unitary plan? I mean, it looks like the council has done what it can with the unitary plan. What, other than that, are you proposing to do?
Well, there's a lot more than we can do from just the unitary plan. The first thing we have to do is make more land available. And council and government are the biggest land owners in Auckland. And there's so many examples of council sitting on land or buildings that are unoccupied. So you can't say to Auckland, we need more homes and then not make them available. The second is the consenting process. We have to streamline it and it has to be more cost effective. The third is the infrastructure. We need infrastructure into these growth areas faster and definitely targeting the government's infrastructure fund. And the fourth one is the type of homes. We need more affordable housing. So that does look like more apartments, more townhouses, and more homes around that 500,000 mark.
John Polino, you're shooting big here. You want to build a new city. Tell us about that plan.
Look, you know...
Tell us where it's going to be too.
It's in, Mark, it's in South Auckland.
It's a fair question.
It's beyond the metropolitan urban boundary for many reasons. Look, cities around the world have built satellite cities. You've got Brisbane that's built Springfield. Melbourne's now building Geelong. Perth's actually building another satellite city. And the reason for that is because you're able to accommodate quite a lot of people and build homes very quickly in an open area and in greenfield.
I mean, Mark's question's a fair one. It's the most obvious one. Where is the city?
Well, we have to go beyond the metropolitan urban boundary where the land is 8 times cheaper than the land on the other side of the boundary, which is down in Pukekohe area. Pukekohe, Papakura, that area. But look, while we're growing population and we're growing housing, if you don't grow jobs at the same time and grow police and fire department, schools and all those things, if you don't grow them at the same time, you have no plan. The unitary plan is only a zoning map. It's only 10% of what a real growth plan is. It's only a zoning map. It only tells us where we're going to build houses. It doesn't tell us how we're going to build them and how we're going to include all those other amenities.
I'll get a brief reaction to that from Mark Thomas, and then I want to go to the first of our audience questions this morning. So, Mark Thomas, new city? It's a big idea.
So we've got 10 metro centres, as they're called, as part of the unitary plan. You can call them satellite cities, you can call them whatever you like. They're actually part of what we've been working on for 4 years.
No, they're not part of it.
They're based around transport hubs. They're actually opportunities for us to grow more quickly.
So you don't think we need Palinoville?
I think we've got Aucklandville, and actually we can have Aucklandville. We can have Aucklandville with more affordable housing. If you get a mayor who's putting more of our resourcing into the Hendersons, the Manukau's, areas where
Which was my policy for 3 years.
where we have significant council landholding. We've been holding ourselves back. So council's been a big part of the problem. You talk to business, and you'd say actually we could have had more affordable housing in the last 3 years.
Yeah, okay. We'll get a business take on this, but we're going to talk to our audience first. The first of our audience questions from AUT student Laura Tupo. Good morning to you, Laura. What's your question?
Maloi Lele. My question is, I'm from a Pacific community, and in Māori communities as well, we don't have the luxury of generational wealth. So, you know, house prices have topped $1 million in Auckland. I can't get on that rung, leveraging off my parents' wealth. How are you? What is the one policy that you have that you're going to rapidly increase the supply in Auckland and ease these house prices?
Well, and we're going to quickly go down. We're going to go down the podium. Phil Goff first, and keep these brief, and because we want Laura to have a fair crack at an answer here.
I think your point's an excellent one. My two boys have got into homes because mum and dad could afford to lend them the deposit on it. That's not possible for a lot of families that haven't got the capital base to do that from. I think the biggest thing that needs to be done here, the biggest lever of power is held by government, and that is to go back to providing starter homes. You know, when I was Minister of Housing, a third of all the homes we started were designed for people that were buying their first home. They were cheaper. We need to work with central government to bring that back. We also need to do more in the way of social housing, because the people at the bottom of the heap are the people that are being crucified by this housing crisis.
Okay, Vic Crone.
Well, I talked about 4 things earlier, but on top of that, actually, there's a whole new market that I believe we need to create in Auckland, and that is impact investing. So we've got some fabulous examples of social housing services, such as the Housing Foundation, and what we need to do is connect them with investors in New Zealand and globally who can help us build out the supply of affordable homes to people not just like yourself, but to those families that I talked about, who have both parents working with a couple of children and are facing a lifetime of rent.
Okay.
That market doesn't exist, and we need to grow
John
it.
Polino.
What we have right now is we have a plan that allows developers to build a house here, a house there, a house there. Look, by opening up the land, we open up the land, we acquire that land, we're able to build 35,000 homes within 3 years. You know, the satellite city is what the rest of the world does. We can fit 300,000 people in an area. But not only that, while that city's growing, we're able to build those homes for under 400,000. We can have residential properties for 300,000 because the land beyond the metropolitan urban boundary is worth $10,000 per household lot, where on the inside of the boundary it's now up to $550,000 per lot. So we're able to reduce the cost of that land. We're able to build so people can afford it. But the most important thing is that while we're building that growth, we need to have schools, we need to have police, fire department, ambulance, and everything else that goes along with that town, that city. You know.
We're getting off topic there. You've made your point. You've got your new city. Mark Thomas.
So Phil's answer is to bang the table and ask the government to do more, because that's the only play he knows. He's been doing that all his life. What I know as part of Auckland Council for 6 years is I'll create special development authorities. That's what I'm calling them as part of my growth plan. A version of the government's urban development authority where we can actually concentrate more resources and expertise to get more affordable housing. But the second thing I'll do is partner with those groups that know their communities well. In my own ward of Aoraki, Ngāti Whātua is building whānau-based housing where they're actually encouraging people and low-income earners to actually own the home. So let's partner more effectively with community providers like that.
All right. Laura, do you feel any more confident about getting on the housing ladder after those answers?
Honestly, not really, right. but I'm hopeful. I am hopeful. If you.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for that. Let's, before we leave housing, just touch on the issue of homelessness, and because as I think some of you guys did mention, obviously that's the really sharp end of this. Phil Goff, you want to house the homeless in the old Mount Eden prison, or have I got that wrong?
No, I was approached.
Is that what you want to do?
I was approached by a group of people who work with the homeless and said, would you approach the Minister of Corrections to see if we would have that facility open to us? And my first instinct was, what, use a prison to put the homeless in? And then I thought about it. It's been empty for 7 years. It's got gymnasiums, it's got cooking facilities, it's got shower facilities, it's got sleeping facilities. If you could upgrade it, it's an option you should look at. No, look, that's not the answer. That's a very short-term emergency housing option. The real answer to homelessness is dealing with the shortage of housing, one, and secondly, for the chronically homeless, housing first. Put a person in a house and then put a wraparound service to deal with the causes of their homelessness. Yes. If it's things like mental health or addiction.
This is a big issue in our city. Have any of you candidates gone and spent time, gone and have a look?
Absolutely.
You have?
Yes, I have. So I was interviewed, in fact, John Campbell interviewed me, your colleague, with a homeless person about my plan to actually take more action than any mayor's ever done, and that's to use vacant buildings that council has. So we've had the Civic building, the old head office for council here in Auckland, vacant for 2 years. It's actually subtenanted, so it can be used. We could have used that as a temporary shelter to actually sort of provide more pressure on government so they can get in there and provide the services they need. I've done a lot of work with the City Mission and talked to both them and LifeWise about my plans. They know there's more than mayor that they can do. We don't need 10-year plans. We're halfway into our third 10-year plan to solve homelessness, and it's getting worse. Council can take action by using resources that we control.
Okay, part of this whole debate, do you have a word on homeless?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's go quickly. Well, that's generous.
It's unusual, isn't it?
John Bellino.
Sure, look, my restaurant down in Takanini sits on Bruce Pullman Park on the back end of it. I've been out there with the homeless for the past 8 months. We usually go out on a Monday night and bring them soup and such. You know, there were some issues that people don't even realize down there. I had originally, a while back, I went to go see one of our MPs, and I said, look, why don't we get the Army out there to set up marquees and all, kitchens and everything? They could actually keep these people warm at night. I was told that's not what they want. I said, I don't think you understand what these people want. You know, you think that these people don't want help, but they actually do want help. The problem is that when the media goes down there, they don't want you to see they have children in the car with them. You know, that's what they don't want you to see. You know, I give a gentleman some soup. Actually, it's Jason. And I said, would you like another soup? He'll take a second cup, but he won't take a third cup. You know why? Because at 9 o'clock, the toilets close, and they're afraid that they don't want to eat too much because they don't want to have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and there's no toilet there. We have to be actually with the people and understand what the real issues are if we really want to take care of it. And I'm out there, and I'm in there helping them.
Victoria Crone.
Yeah, so for me, what I observe, and not just from government, but from these candidates and local council, is ideas that just come and mow over the top of some incredibly good services out there. So LifeWise and there's other services are already doing a great job at not just understanding, to John's point, the impact of homelessness and how you solve it, but putting solutions around it. So I actually believe the Mayor should play a role in championing homelessness and bringing together not just the providers but the resourcing, and then actually transparently reporting back to the public of Auckland as to the progress we're making. I don't think it's up to the council to come and run over with ideas. We know the council don't do this well and they haven't solved it already. So we must partner with communities and providers around this.
Part of this whole debate about housing and the pressure is, part of it is population. Let's talk briefly about that, because we know, 120 new Aucklanders every day, something like 45,000 people came into the city last year. Phil Goff, you want to slow the immigration into Auckland, if I'm reading you correctly. You want to slow the issuing of temporary work visas. In short, you believe there's too much immigration into Auckland?
I think that the rate of growth of population into Auckland exceeds our capacity to deal with that in terms of providing housing and decent transport systems. I was looking at the figures last night, immigration figures. 209,000 temporary work visas issued last year. Net permanent residency went up by 69,000. I'm a pro-immigrant person. I think immigration brings energy and talent and skills to New Zealand.
But you want less
you've got to temper it until the infrastructure can catch up.
But you want less of it.
I want less of it until the infrastructure's in place. My challenge to government is this: either slow the immigration or give us the resources to match the infrastructure needs of that growth.
So look, in 2010, Phil's challenge to government was, we've got a cake tin of people leaving New Zealand and get immigration up and fix it. These are cycles, and you can't actually control every aspect of the cycle. No, you can't.
We've done it for years.
And because we are talking not just to Aucklanders here, but across New Zealand, if we say we're going to stop the temporary work visas, then let's get real. We need to understand a big chunk of those work visas are for tourism, are for agriculture right across New Zealand. So this is not just about Auckland. My view is that, yes, we are struggling to keep up with growth. As I said, cities are the emerging growth engines of the world. And we need to stand up and deliver that infrastructure to support that.
Look at the data a little more closely. Of the 69,000, half of them are returning Kiwis or people people coming from Australia.
No.
25% are actually people here for education. The remaining 25%, as we know, are actually filling jobs in remote parts of the country that Kiwis, for whatever reason, can't do. So rather than try and pitch to be Minister of Immigration, which seems to be his play, what I'll do is focus more on building the infrastructure we need. We get $3.5 billion a year from Auckland. It's growing to more than $4 billion.
Right.
There's much more we can use to play.
John Polino?
Look, first of all, if you can't manage the growth, you shouldn't be managing. That's the first thing. Now, look, this is a golden opportunity. We have a population growth. This is a golden opportunity. Do you know that 300,000 people in 10 years will bring us $12 billion a year in household income? That's $3 to $4 billion that goes to central government, plus another $1 to $2 billion in GST and $1.2 billion in rates if we grow properly. If we grow properly and we get people out of their cars so they live closer to where they work. That's the opportunity we have.
All right. I want to move on to Māori issues shortly. I just note that we are streaming this live on Facebook now. Streaming this live on Facebook, so you can also check in on that as well. Māori are 10% of the Auckland population, so about 150,000 Māori living in Auckland. Phil Goff, we'll start with you on this one. The Royal Commission recommended 3 dedicated Māori seats on the Auckland Council. The government rejected that. Is it time to have dedicated seats for Māori on the council?
I think it's better to have elected representation on the council than appointed representation. We have the Independent Māori Statutory Board with a limited power to vote, but it's appointed, it's not elected.
Yeah, so is that
if you're
a yes
in a democracy...
Is that a yes to dedicated seats?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's 3. It needs to be proportionate to the wider population, but...
That's interesting, because I haven't heard that at all from you. You were saying this morning that you believe there should be dedicated Māori seats, that you're elected from the Māori role, and you would look at that as mayor?
I think that's better than having a non-elected appointed people with voting rights on council, and we of course do that in central government. We've done it for as long as you and I have been alive. Why wouldn't you apply it? Why wouldn't you apply it?
You've been alive a little longer than I have.
Well, let's not split hairs on this.
We've both still got some here, which is good.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
So just get this clear, and you guys will get a fair crack, but this is interesting. You are saying that perhaps you would look at scrapping the Māori Statutory Board and replacing it with dedicated Māori seats to be elected by electors off the Māori roll, should you be mayor?
Yeah. I can't do that. That's a statutory decision by government.
But you would advocate for it?
But if I'm asked my opinion, as you're doing now, would I rather have elected people on the council representing the Māori population or appointed people? My answer is it's got to be elected, because that's what democracy is about.
No, I think that would take us back to kind of ring-fence Māori into particular seats of their own. I want more Māori people, I want more Asian people, I want more people who look like modern Auckland serving on the council, and that's been a key part of what I've talked to people about. So
are Māori adequately represented on the Auckland Council?
No, they're not. They're not 10%.
And the solution of that is just to keep doing what we're doing?
No, the solution to that is to kind of get a mayor who can kind of connect more effectively. I've worked very closely with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei in my ward, and I think there's huge potential for us to encourage more people into council, but we've got to make council more appealing. Most people, not just Māori, don't want to stand for council because they don't see that it makes a difference.
OK, I'm going to bring in another audience question now, and this one with a bit of expertise. I'm going to bring in our Māori issues correspondent, Mihi Ngārangi Forbes, because there's another significant issue here about sites of cultural significance that I think Mihi wants to touch on. Kia ora, Mihi.
Kia ora, Guyan. Tēnā koutou katoa. Well, Auckland has 19 iwi who have interests in mana whenua and a number of urban authorities. We've had a bit of a ring around, and we've found that the biggest issues that for them are housing, homelessness, tiakitanga, which is caring for people and the environment. But I have one question from an iwi leader that I'd like to put to you, Phil and Vic, about significant places, and this iwi leader asks, how will you strike a balance between development and protecting the culturally significant places?
I think there does need to be protection for culturally significant places, Wāhi Tapu, for example. There needs to be that protection in place. I think in the initial attempt to do that, Council got the balance wrong.
It's exactly working with the Māori community. And to your point, Guyon, I think we need to understand what is the problem we're trying to solve and whether we have elected representatives or not. So as Mayor, I would work with you to understand what is working well and what isn't. I do believe that a number of the solutions that I'm putting forward will address some of the issues that you have, and certainly working with social or community providers to provide more support around that area is good as well.
How will that happen though? So if you've got significant, if an iwi says, yes, this is significant to us, but you want to develop the area, how will you make that happen? Because of the unitary plan has done away with the list of significant places.
Yeah, that's right. And so there was the list put forwards, and then the council said no. And I think that they have two very binary outcomes, and that's not the answer we're looking for. So we need to go back and say, well, if it's not this full list, which ones are they? And then how do we investigate that indeed that they are sites of significance? Because council also needs to turn to the public and say, we must protect these sites.
Guyon, we didn't do enough work to actually clarify what those 3,200 sites of value were. Now, there's two categories, right? There's actually sites of historic significance. In fact, we increased those from about 60 by 14. But the large number, the 3,000, we didn't do the work. Much like the pre-1944 character overlays, we didn't put the time and effort in council to actually have meaningful conversations with people. So we haven't done our job, and that's what I'll do.
If I can bring you in here, and I've read your book. I haven't read all of it, actually, to be honest.
Thank you.
I did read the section.
Thanks for at least getting through it.
I did read the section on this, though. You seem to think that this whole idea of cultural consultation around these issues is a bit of a rort. I'll quote you, the current procedures are little more than a very nice compensation stream and the ability to hold up any development without any real cultural justification.
Sure. Well, you're taking that a little out of context.
He's reading it correctly.
No, it's got quote marks around it. You only had 3 pages on this. I read your book and it's got small print and it's, it's got, hold your book up, it's pretty small, isn't it?
It's a great book, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty small. So I read those 3 pages on that.
So it's a good portion. No, the issue is that, unfortunately right now, if a person wants to develop their property, even just build a garage, and they have to have a consultation, that person can delay them for as long as they like, and they could charge them for as much as they want.
Some of the iwi leaders are running around Auckland holding up people from building garages?
Well, yes, unfortunately, that is happening, and we need to stop it.
Can you give me an example of that happening?
Well, I've had people talk to me about different situations that
they said, I couldn't build my garage because the local iwi leader said it was
this is not made up, and even the iwi know that it's happening, and they're actually, it's making it difficult for the rest of the iwi because you have some individuals who are saying, look, give me $50,000 and then I'll sign off on that, and that's not the right thing.
Hang on, that's pretty serious.
That's what's happening.
You're talking about, what, bribery?
No, I'm not talking about bribery. They're saying that's what it's going to cost for me to approve this site. And that needs to stop. We actually have to have some structure. All I'm saying is we have to have structure. And look, what's happened is they're actually going to, council's taking it all away. And I'm saying, no, don't take it away. Just put some structure. We need to have things. We need to stop these knee-jerk reactions and going too far or taking everything away. We need to balance it. And to balance it is by saying, let's put some structure in there. Let's put some time delays on there, to some time frames on things so that people can move forward and it can be legitimate. And the most important thing is that the site has to have a cultural significance, not just we think it does or we guess it does.
Okay, let's come back to brass tacks, if you like. A lot of Māori in the city aren't doing that well economically. Some big problems there, social problems, unemployment. Do you have a commitment, Vic Crone, to the Southern Initiative?
To initiatives in the south?
No,
absolutely.
The Southern Initiative.
I have some concerns around how it's being delivered and the progress around it. The intent of it, absolutely, and I've got some other ideas actually on how we can accelerate progress in the south.
Southern Initiative seems to have gone off the radar. I mean, it was this big idea. They had all these targets. We're going to hold Māori unemployment rates to similar to other ethnicities. We're going to lift the rate of home ownership, even reduce the amount of smoking. It had some real aspirational goals in there. Phil Goff, what would you do to add momentum to those initiatives that looked pretty good on paper in the Auckland plan, but really seem to have fallen off the radar?
Yeah, I think I've visited the Southern Initiative. I think they're doing some things that are really good. I think there are things that they need to be doing better. But the principle behind it is this, and it's one that I support strongly. A guy that I know that works in the South, and he's quite prominent in education, he said, Auckland's like a V6 car, but it's only firing on 5 cylinders. And the 6th cylinder is South Auckland and the low educational achievement levels in that part of the city. Now, this is something that council needs to be involved in, but again, can't drive. It's about education, it's about housing, it's about health.
We have no growth plan. This is the same play, though. It's the government's fault. It's the government's fault.
That the council can't drive it is that the resources aren't there in the levels that we need. It's a wider educational, health and housing issue. But council should be a partner with central government to make sure that we are addressing
quickly,
that critical
and then
problem.
I'm going to come to Mark Thomas.
Yeah, it needs to be broader than government. There are some very good initiatives. So Comet, led by council, is actually doing a good job in the education space. You've got ARA, which is a combination of not just local council but government and the employees and industry around the South Auckland area in terms of transitioning students into roles.
But it's so good now, Vikram. Why are we still getting the same numbers?
Because they don't have enough money behind them to make an impact at scale.
So
and that's what we need to do. We need to take some of these initiatives and garner government and council and social investors, which is behind a lot of these initiatives, and power them forwards.
Okay,
they
Mark
will
Thomas,
do way better than anything the government
Mark
or council
Thomas,
will come up with.
This question to you, because I wonder whether we have two Aucklands in this respect. If you go into the schools, take Old Eddie College in Papatoetoe, in 2015 their roll was 1,483, right? Pākehā students, 1%. So about 15 Pākehā kids at that school. Sir Edmund Hillary Collegiate in Otara, 507 students on the roll. I looked at the ERO report last night, 0 Pākehā. There might be a couple, but in terms of their actual role on ERO roll, no Pākehā kids at all. Why?
Well, that's the changing face of Auckland, and it's not two Aucklands.
No, but there's 20% of the population in Otara Papatoetoe Community Board are Pākehās.
Sure.
So the Pākehās are there. The Pākehā, I know it's Pākehā, singular. They're not going to those schools.
So the answer is, what's council's role in this? And the Southern Initiative is very well conceived, but after 5 years of that, 3 different leaders, it's not delivering actually what council can do. What we're trying to do effectively is compete with government, and we're ending up wasting resources and not improving actually some of the core infrastructure and some of the things that would make a meaningful difference.
I guess I'm asking a simple question. Is this a segregated city?
No, it's not. What it is
when you've got no white children in those schools,
sure,
it is a segregated city, isn't it?
Well, is it? Is that? Are we talking about where people are choosing to live, or are we talking about someone's view? Someone's view of where they should live.
You guys tell me then why we don't have any Pākehā kids in these schools.
The issue is, what's council's role in this? Even if we think that the argument that you're proposing is a problem, what's our role here?
Well,
part of the role is more affordable housing, better council facilities.
Phil Goff thinks it's a problem. I'll come to you, but John first.
What question are we on right now?
Segregation in the city. Segregation.
Look, let me tell you what happens in South Auckland. I mean, as far as schools, why Pākehā want to go to different schools and all, because parents want their children to go to better schools. But this is what's happening in South Auckland.
But they're good schools, though.
This is what's happening. This is what's happening in South Auckland. You know, as Auckland has got more and more expensive, we pushed people, the less fortunate people, out into the outer suburbs. Now, when you push people further and further and further away, you're actually pushing them further away from their job. You know, you have families where you have a mother who actually takes care of the kids, but they can work part-time. Or one person can work part-time, the other works full-time. But they can no longer work part-time because it takes an hour and a half to get through the congestion, to get a job, to work for 3 hours, an hour and a half back. So they can't work. So we're changing the culture of Auckland. We're changing the society. In 10 years from now, you're going to have grandparents leave Auckland because they can't afford to live here anymore. They're not going to be spending time with their children.
We're coming off topic a little bit here.
Well, it's about what's happening.
Phil. I'm going to quickly take Vic and then you.
Okay.
So we absolutely have issues. And so I'm just going to speak from somebody in terms of an executive in technology and business who has experienced a bit of diversity, nothing like what either the Māori Pacific or Asian community have experienced in Auckland, which is an increasing alienation. And I do think that the Mayor of Auckland has a role to play in championing a city that is more inclusive and more compassionate. And as I said, I've only had a little dash of the taste of what diversity can look like from the negative side. I mean, you look standing here, you look at our council, we have no ethnic representation on that.
Pretty right here this morning, aren't we?
And absolutely, I do think the Mayor plays a role in the way they lead, they behave, and they bring communities together.
We want to get to transport, so let's have a final word on this.
Okay, we definitely need an inclusive city. My vision for Auckland is not about a city that is divided into gated communities and people that are living in substandard conditions. My kids went to one of those South Auckland schools. It's a Decile 1 school, Papakura. I don't think that it does its duty by the students that go there. We have to do more in that area. We have to speak. I would have to speak as a mayor.
The schools aren't doing their duty.
No, I think we are not getting the quality that we need in some of those schools, and the school that I instanced is one of them. Other of those schools, Aorere, you mentioned, is doing a really good job. It's my wife's old school. I know the South Auckland schools. I know the problems that exist there, and the way that we'll solve that is a mayor that speaks up for the city, but working with government, working with the corporate sector, working with the NGOs.
All right. Okay, we're going to move on to transport soon, which is another big chunky topic. So let's break things up a little bit. We don't have ad breaks. This is Radio New Zealand, RNZ. So let's break this up a little bit with some lighter questions. Perhaps we can segue into transport with some questions on the transport theme. John Polino, what would your mayoral car be?
I've never even thought about it. I don't even care.
Phil Goff, I guess you'd have a motorbike, would you?
I think I'll be using the motorbike. It's a good way of getting around town. Only takes up one small space on the road. But look, I think the mayor can lead by example, and I think the mayoral car ought to be an electric car. What's more, I think the council fleet should be converted to electric,
really? And
it should be reduced. There's 800 of them. Yeah. We don't need 800. You wouldn't do it all overnight. You'd do it as you replace your fleet. But why not? That's the way we're going to get an electric car fleet and bus fleet. It's by the corporate section and council leading the way.
Okay, Victoria Crone, your local bus mine's the 274 down Mount Eden Road. What's your local bus number?
I don't know, because I don't use my Parnell bus. It doesn't get me to places that I need to go. And,
that's a problem, eh?
That is a problem. And that was my answer to the question. Of course, it's going to be an electric vehicle. Or actually, perhaps what if we just got all council staff to use Auckland's public transport for at least a year? No other form of transport.
An interesting commitment.
And that's what happened in one of the cities. I'm not committing.
I'll just get you on the record here. I'll get you on the record, because that's what we do. Are you saying you would commit to using public transport for a year only? You wouldn't use a car?
No, I'm saying that's not effective at all. And this is the problem. And if Auckland Council used our public transport system more, I think we would get faster fixes in it. And that's what has happened in some cities internationally.
We're going to come to one of our audience questions in just a second, but a quick one for you, and you'll probably know, because you know this sort of stuff, Mark Thomas. What's the price of a one-stage bus pass in Auckland?
Well, I have a hop card, of course. And so that's the most cost-effective way for Aucklanders to use public transport.
Have you got the price?
Of my hop card?
No, of a one. What did I have? Because I've got it written down.
Where are you going?
I'm going a one-stage bus journey.
120?
It's about 70.
No, it's more than 70. That.
Any more bids on 170?
180 or something.
180, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to let's take some serious questions now instead of my flippant ones. Generation Zero's Leroy Beckett. Good morning to you. What's your question?
Morning. Good to see you have such detailed knowledge of our public transport system. I just want to know what your top transport priority is for the next term.
Let's go the other way, starting with Mark Thomas and come down towards me.
Reversing Len Brown's $113 million transport budget cut. So I'll do that over the first 3 years of my mayoralty, because we've got to spend more in transport. What that will do is that'll fast-track the busway from Pakuranga to Panmure, the so-called Amity project. Second top priority in the current Auckland plan, not due to start till 2021. I'll bring that forward. I'll work more collaboratively with NZTA so we get faster progress on the Northern Busway extension. The business case for the Northwestern Busway due in April 2017 needs council more on board to get that out quicker, and we've got to have future rail planning down south. That only happens, the plan we know about, the answers we already have only happen with a mayor who's able to rewrite the budget and get more funding to get those things happening more quickly.
John Polino.
Okay, so we have two different issues. We have our growth for the future. We need to make sure that we grow in a way where we get people out of their cars. And the only way to do that is by building up the CBD areas like Manukau, Albany, Henderson, and building a satellite city. That will reduce driving and getting people out of their car. Then we have today's issues. Now we obviously have major problems, like, for instance, in Albany, the bus station, there's not enough parking. I know a lot of people down in South Auckland who would love to use the train but can't use the train because there's not enough parking. So we need to actually increase quite a bit of parking for those areas. If we're able to intensify those nodes like Albany, Henderson, Manukau, and the new satellite city, we're able to actually spend most of our money on creating the best transport between them.
so that wherever you live, you're able to go closely to that city. Even from Hamilton, we'll be able to get that train up and running again. But one of the things we should do, LA did something.
This your final point?
LA had an amazing project they did many years ago when electric cars.
About LA this
when electric cars came out, and they actually gave a tax break on buying electric cars. And I think central government should do something like that.
Should look at that.
Give a tax incentive for people to buy electric cars.
There isn't one thing. There are multiple priorities to fix congestion. The first is how do we make our existing network far more accessible, so bus services, feeder services, more safety around our public transport. The second is, despite spending $8 billion, there are 7 key initiatives that I'm proposing right across Auckland to fill the gaps, and that is across public transport and roading. We do have issues across both. And the third is how do we look to the future? Just as technology has revolutionised how we operate, you grew up with this stuff, it's going to revolutionise our public transport and our roading networks. And the final one is we need to broaden our sources of funding for our infrastructure for transport across Auckland. We can't continue to expect taxpayers and ratepayers to pick up all of the costs, and especially taxpayers across New Zealand.
Phil Goff.
Yeah, build a public transport system that makes it attractive for people to get out of their cars, and a public transport system that can cater for a population that's going to grow by another 1 million people in the next 30 or so years. My grandfather drove a tram. In those days, more people travelled by tram, this is back in the 1950s, or earlier than that.
When you first came into Parliament.
Not quite that long ago. I know I have the wisdom of the years, but more people were travelling by the 1950s, more people were travelling by tram than at any time using all forms of public transport up to 2 years ago. So you've got to have a system of busways and light rail if you're going to be a small global city, not a large provincial town.
OK, we're going to go on to fiscal and economic matters shortly. I just want to get your views on congestion charging. It's obviously one of the solutions that people talk about, and let's move through this very quickly. Mark Thomas, congestion charges, toll roads, yes or no?
It's not. They're two different things. So toll roads may play a part of getting things like Penlink up. So areas where you've got dedicated routes, that could well play a part. Congestion charging can work in other cities, but it's not the first play for my mayoralty, because I can see opportunities for us to spend more of the existing money we've got on transport. People give us $3.5 billion a year. Let's use that better and more effectively, and then have a separate conversation about whether we think we need to do congestion charging.
You're a no on this, aren't you, Vic Crone?
Absolutely, and that's because it actually impacts the people of South Auckland and East Auckland the most. They are the ones impacted. They are the ones who are most likely to be able to afford it.
Look, no, definitely not for existing roads and infrastructure. But, Transport is actually telling council to stop building this way. You need to build differently because we can't give you the transport you need. And we need to start listening to Transport. Okay. It's not always their fault.
And Phil Goff, you want some sort of switch, don't you?
Yeah, despite what everybody says up here, we're going to have some form of road pricing, no doubt about that. I'd start with a regional petrol tax. It's simple, it's cheap to administer, that raises revenue. The other thing you've got to do is try to influence behaviour, and congestion charging is the one thing that has worked successfully in Singapore and Stockholm and London. Ultimately, as our city's an international city, we will end up with that, and that will be to raise revenue and influence behaviour.
It is 2016, right? So instead of just throwing sticks at people to change behaviour, why don't we look at things like carpooling apps, car sharing apps, actually to get more than one person per car? There is a lot of work happening globally on the world stage, so we can actually make a real difference reducing the number of cars out there without whacking people who don't have any alternative choice to get to work.
The two things aren't comparable.
Auckland is paying enough, Guyan. I mean, Aucklanders have just recovered from the 10% average rates increase last year. We've got, I think, $817 million a year that we spend on coordinating and admin that we should be reprioritising.
Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. We all want an infrastructure system that works. I want government to contribute more to that, but we're going to have to contribute something ourselves. So get real, guys. We are going to have to make that contribution. And what's more, all of the polling that Auckland Council's done said that Aucklanders are prepared to pay through road pricing if we can get a better system.
Because we don't have a plan, that's why.
This is the show me the money guy, and the money's a new tax.
Yeah, look, let's just charge people.
I'm being upfront and honest. That's the difference,
well, that's because you don't know any better, Phil.
Well, if we had a plan that works, actually, we wouldn't have to keep charging the people for everything. It's a failure.
let's move on.
So we all get it for nothing.
Let's move on to economic matters. And one of the big issues here, I think, for voters when you talk to them about what sort of economic stewardship they want, I think a lot of them are interested in the assets that we own already in Auckland. Phil Goff, you told us as Labour Party leader that asset sales were poison. Now you say you won't sell strategic assets, but you will consider the sale of surplus non-strategic assets. What might a surplus non-strategic asset look like?
If you've got unutilised land that could be used for building, of course you'd sell it.
A golf course?
Some people would say if it wasn't for the fact that the Remuera Golf Course had a lease out to 2091, using the ratepayer to subsidise every golf player by $12,000 a year is probably not the best use of the ratepayer's funds.
OK, I imagine we can get a little talk about the things that people don't want to sell. Can any of you tell us some things that you would sell, that are sitting there, you think, we don't need this, we can swap the capital value of this and buy something else?
Well, I'm talking about swapping, and I'm being very clear that I don't want to wait for government to kind of rain money down on us. I want us to kind of take more control and be more responsible. And I think the argument that was made by Cameron and Partners and EY, two considered reports, said we should look at swapping half the value of our airport shares and the value of the port operating business into assets we'll still own but have a higher priority for, such as that busway I mentioned from Pakuranga to Panmure. Aucklanders would have to approve that in something like a referendum, but that's a way that we control more of our destiny.
OK, we've still got a lot...
control more of our destiny by coming up with plans that actually fund things.
Yeah, we've still got a lot to cover, so I want to shift this debate on economic matters and take in another one of our audience questions, because I know you guys are talking a lot about rate freezes, in some cases rate reductions, and whether or not that will mean a reduction in services. And I think Heather Schotter, the Committee for Auckland, you've got a question along those lines. Good morning to you, Heather.
Good morning. Given your commitment towards fiscal efficiencies, what assurances can you give us that any cost cutting won't compromise council's service performance, given the anticipated growth here in Auckland, which of course leads to increasing demand for services and infrastructure funding?
Yeah. Victoria Crone, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for me, it's about making the use of council's resources. So we've got $60 billion of your money and our future debt every decade, and it's about spending that as wisely as we can, and that's not currently happening. That's number one. So if you clean that up and reprioritise some of the lower spend activities into things like transport, that's what I'm proposing. Number two, though, is it is about broadening the sources of funding, and that's what I bring. So yes, we can certainly work with the government to say, please, can you help us here? And these are the reasons why it works for you and the rest of New Zealand taxpayers. The third is how we bring in public-private partnerships. That's how a lot of cities internationally grow, is they bring forward somebody else's capital spend to get the economic benefit of that early. And the fourth is, as I've mentioned a couple of times, which no one's really cottoning onto, is there's this whole impact investing social capital market emerging globally. There's $17 billion of investment of that, of which a quarter of that's in housing, by the way.
Okay.
So how do we open up all of those sources of funding? We do have to take the pressure off ratepayers and taxpayers and bring in new sources of funding.
John Polino.
You know, look, what's happened in the past 5 years that all of a sudden we had to borrow $5 billion more and our rates are rising drastically. It's the growth plan. It's how we're growing. We're managing it. We're mismanaging it. We're not managing it properly. You know that you are not responsible for paying for Auckland's growth. That's an investment. And the investment has to be done in a way that we can see where the money's generated. Like when I talk about that satellite city and how that brings us $12 billion a year in household income. You know, Los Angeles is bankrupt. Auckland was modeled after Los Angeles, and the reason why it's bankrupt is because of the way it grew. People are working in too many different areas, living in too many different areas.
Can we bring this back specifically, though, John? You're talking about cutting rates by 10% over the term. How would you do that? Let's get to the crux of it, Heather? How would you do that without compromising a whole bunch of services? Because I think that equates, and tell me if I'm wrong, to something like $175 million less revenue.
It's $145 million.
Okay.
And
let's take your number, $140 million. What's going to go?
Well, look, in the past 7 months, Stevens Towns has found $70 million in savings. So if he's already found $70 million, I said we're going to cut that budget.
Can you give us a couple of concrete examples about what I would use now as a ratepayer that goes under your plan?
Well, the payroll, for instance, if you look at historical averages,
Payroll goes?
The payroll is at 28%. And historical averages show that payroll should be at 24%.
So you cut council staff or wages?
Of course, you've got to put a sinking lid policy on council because we're overstaffed. We increased by 3,000 staff members. That's huge. That's because of inefficiency. Then we have procurements. You know, I'll give you a quick example. Back in 1999, I did the big Christmas tree in ATS Square.
No, probably not. Mark Thomas.
Heather, your questions about what commitment will we make to kind of continuing the services, and my response is to say I'll deliver better valuable services. And so we have ATED, our tourism economic development business, $60 million a year we spend to that. I don't think they're doing the best job for us in terms of economic development. So I would give that back to business, but give that to the Committee for Auckland and EMA and the Chamber of Commerce to run. So we actually have to reset some of what we're doing. Of that $817 million I mentioned, we spend in planning. In my area, for example, we had 6 months to get a report done, several $1,000
All right,
to
everyone's
tell us.
got their report.
But this is an example to tell us what we couldn't do.
Okay.
$250,000 on arts plan for Auckland, $110,000 on a languages strategy. There are better ways of doing this and delivering more value.
Quick final word, because we're going to move to some questions. We're going to go to Todd Niall and his our panel of experts for analysis on this very shortly. So, Phil Goff, a quick final word.
To Heather's question, Heather, you're aware as I am that Aucklanders are suffering from rate exhaustion as rates have gone up by double-digit figures. What we've got to do is a number of things. Yes, we've got to find the efficiencies. I'm absolutely convinced there are efficiencies to find in council, including better procurement. But we've also got to have this concept of revenue sharing. When Auckland grows by 45,000, it's a big income earner for GST, income tax, company tax. Where does that go? It goes to central government. Where do the costs of growth fall? They fall on local government, our city. We've got to get the government to come to the party and get a fair share of that revenue if we're getting 50% plus of the country's growth.
I'm going to throw over to Todd very shortly, but just before we do, a very quick and brief rapid-fire questions, if you like, on this. Mark Thomas, I'll come to you firstly. What's your biggest flaw?
I'm very purposeful, and so if I don't get the purpose I want, then what I do is I work with people until we get there.
Okay, John Polino, have you ever broken the law? And it can't be a bylaw.
A speeding ticket.
Victoria Crone, who was the last great mayor of Auckland?
Well, I think actually Sir Doug Meyer-Robertson for me stands out.
And Phil Goff, what does the mayor get paid?
Mayor gets paid the same as a cabinet minister. I think it's about $250,000, slightly higher.
All right. Are they worth it? Let's go to...
Not yet.
You should have asked me that question.
Not at the moment.
Let's at this point go to Auckland correspondent Todd Niall.
Well, I'm joined by Stella Muller, who's an entrepreneur from South Auckland, and Simon Wilson, editor-at-large of Metro magazine. I guess I'd quite like to go straight to the discussion about South Auckland, because that's something I've never heard any of them discuss before. In the Southern Initiative, which was one of the big strategic initiatives of the council back in the early days, 2010, 2011, and has kind of faded. Stella, you're a passionate advocate for the possibilities of the South. Were you inspired by what you heard?
Yeah, I think I was pleasantly surprised by some of the commentary that came through. I mean, obviously, as a South Auckland resident, as someone who lives, works, and has a business in South Auckland, my thing is really about what are we going to do to unlock the potential of South Auckland. And often we get looked at as a community where we've got to go in and fix things, but I think that really the approach is like recognising the value that we can bring to the Auckland brand, to the economic discussion, and that's what I want to hear.
But do you think they were communicating how they as a mayor and how they as a council could make a difference? That's what it's all about.
Oh, I think that's right. I was... They know it's an issue, but you're quite right, it isn't an issue that they've been talking about much in the campaign. I spent some time in Tangaroa College this year, which is a Decile 1 school in Otara, and it's pretty typical of the sorts of problems that are faced in the South. It's a very good school. They have a good first 15, they have good academic record, they have good cultural record. I spent some time with their big sing choir, really exciting stuff. One of the problems they have, of course, is that everybody who's any good at Tangaroa College, someone comes knocking and offers them a scholarship. There are 16,000 students in the south of Auckland who bus out of the area every day to go to a so-called better school. That is devastating for the region. And that kind of thing, the idea that we'll fix Auckland's problems in the poverty areas by just taking out the best and brightest, has to be rethought. There is so much more work that needs to be done on the Southern Initiative. It's great that they started talking about it, but there's a lot more. Council does need to own it in the political sense of saying we will lead government, non-government agencies and everybody else in this.
But there must be things that the council can do in the short term to ease what you've called the daily grind.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's obviously, I mean, what I was keen to hear today was some of the high-level aspirational concepts that our candidates have for South Auckland. But on a physical and daily grind level, I mean, I know as a South Auckland resident that there are obvious differences between our parks and some of our facilities compared to other parts of Auckland. And often when we have to think about where we want to have Sunday lunch or do something special, we're often getting in the cars and going down to One Tree Hill or to Mission Bay. We don't have I would really like to see more investment in our parks. I mean, in the summer, I took my children down to our local park, Ngāti Otara, down in South Auckland, and you go for a walk on the tracks, and my poor father, who has walked every day for the last 20 years on that track, can no longer walk on the track. He's got to walk on the grass because they're not fixed. Our parks, sure, there've been some developments with parks and all of that in terms of playground facilities, but there's obvious differences, and I would really like to make South Auckland a place where I love to live by having some of those physical assets developed in our community.
Simon, one of the things that fascinated me was particularly Phil Goff and Vic Crone were actually kind of knowledgeable about the Southern Initiative and talked about it, and yet we've never really heard them talk about this stuff on the campaign trail. Is this politically risky for them, do you think, to go big on?
Well, I think one of the reasons for that is that the campaign trail itself is dominated by the Residents and Ratepayers Associations, who have their annual general meetings, and they all over the suburbs of Auckland, except in the south and to a degree in the west as well. So in the eastern suburbs, in the central isthmus area and up north, there have been a whole series of meetings, and these are people who tend to be elderly, they tend to be Pākehā, they tend to be fairly wealthy, and they vote. They really tend to vote. So they are, in terms of the public campaign, they are skewing the perception of what the public campaign's all about. And that is an issue for politics in Auckland. Younger people, people who are not Pākehā, are not participating in anything like the same numbers in the whole process.
Because I guess a bit of political courage is going to be needed from a leader to stand up and say, look, Auckland, we actually need to invest more here to help the whole region.
I really like the point that Vic made around we as New Zealand are the fourth or fifth most diverse country in the world, and I really like the point that she made about being a champion of a city of inclusiveness. I mean, the day that Aucklanders can say that they identify as their identity being part of a multicultural, diverse city, it's got to be a good thing. But at the moment, we need our leaders and to champion that, to champion inclusiveness and diversity, and perhaps that's the reason why you see some of this segmented view in the community, because there's a work to be done around that, to celebrating that. And on that very note, I mean, I think one of the things that differentiates Auckland from the world is that we are the biggest Polynesian city in the world. I'd really like to have all Aucklanders own that, not just Pacific people, all Aucklanders, because that's uniquely something that we can all be proud of.
The other interesting thing was the Maori representation issue, where there was a wee bit of shuffling going on there, wasn't there? I mean, I guess I'd be interested to know from Phil Goff, was that a yes or no?
Yes, it wasn't quite a yes, was it?
It was one would be better than the other.
That's right, yes. Actual representation, voting for councillors was better than the alternative, and Phil said that, but he didn't actually say, I think, clearly that he would be advocating it. I wish he would. I wish they all would. It's obviously the more democratic option, and we have got into serious trouble politically this year with council, with people complaining about non-democratically elected representatives.
We need to go back to Guy in a minute, but here's the hard question. How would you rate them? Give them a score out of 10.
Okay, so I would give Phil an 8 out of 10. I'd give Vic an 8 out of 10. John probably a 6, and Mark there a 7. Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things is that there's some real big shifts that have happened. There's a lot of consensus among the candidates. If you take out
transport.
That's right. Transport in particular is interesting. They're all talking about public transport. Nobody's talking about building more motorways or roads. Everybody's talking about public transport. The debate is how to fund it. So I think that the numbers that Stella mentioned, that's pretty much my call too.
Very good. Simon Wilson, editor-at-large from Metro Magazine, Stella Muller, South Auckland entrepreneur, and thanks for being with us, and back to Guyon.
Thank you very much, Todd. And we've only got a minute, so just to clarify that, Phil Goff, because I don't like to leave things hanging. You did say, didn't you, that you would advocate for Māori seats on the council?
I said, I'll repeat it very clearly, that I would prefer to have elected Māori seats than appointed seats.
On the council?
I will make that point to the Minister,
right.
yes.
A quick final word from you, Vic Crone, why people should vote for you when the ballot papers come in?
Yeah, it's the breadth of experience I bring across business, government, private and social enterprise, and fresh. I think it's time for some fresh ideas for our city, and we need to elect a leader that embodies the change that we want to see and we deserve.
John Polino, you can promise, can you, that it won't be Polinoville, this new city that you build?
No, look, it's not going to be Polinoville, but it's going to be a great city. We have the opportunity to actually build up Auckland to be an amazing, great city and to be wealthy, filled with culture. We're an international city. We should be a cultural city, and that's what we need to be doing here.
Mark Thomas, a quick final word from you.
I want to deliver an Auckland that works to make more progress on the things that are holding us back, the housing and the transport. I've got 6 years of deep understanding of Auckland Council, 20 years of complex business experience, and I know the local politicians. So those three things, I think, give us the best chance of delivering an Auckland that works, cracking the housing affordability issue and getting better public transport.
All right, that's about all we have time for this morning. Can I thank you, our guests, the mayoral candidates Phil Goff, Vic Crone, John Polino and Mark Thomas. Our audience here at AUT, remember it has been a joint venture with AUT and RNZ, and of course you at home watching and listening.
The North Island robin, Tautau Wai. RNZ National.
RNZ News at 9. Good morning, I'm Nicola Wright. 2 Auckland mayoral candidates say unused public buildings should be used to provide emergency accommodation for the homeless. The topic was raised at the RNZ Auckland mayoral debate hosted by Guyon Espiner. Phil Goff says he supports the idea of using the old Mount Eden prison to provide emergency housing for those in need, while Mark Thomas says old council offices could also be used for this purpose. Vic Crone says the new Mayor of Auckland should support the organisations that already do work in this area.
So I actually believe the Mayor should play a role in championing homelessness and bringing together not just the providers but the resourcing, and then actually transparently reporting back to the public of Auckland as to the progress we're making. I don't think it's up to the council to come and run over with ideas. We know the council don't do this well and they haven't solved it already.
Mayoral candidate Vic Crone. And Phil Goff also wants to switch the council's large vehicle fleet to electric cars.